The ocean floor holds a library of forgotten voyages. Its shelves are not made of wood, but of ancient shipwrecks, and its books are cargo holds filled with pottery and lost treasures. We are about to open one of the most stunning volumes, a Bronze Age ship called the Uluburun, which sank into the deep darkness over 3,000 years ago. This single vessel, found resting at a depth of over 3,000 feet, carries a story that shatters our old ideas about the ancient world. By the end of this exploration, you will see history not as a collection of isolated kingdoms, but as a vast, interconnected web of trade and ambition. We will uncover how deep-sea shipwrecks are rewriting entire chapters of our past, revealing supply chains of staggering scale that moved everything from everyday wine to royal copper across continents. How could a single sunken ship connect the coast of Turkey to the forests of the Baltic and the deserts of Egypt? What does a broken piece of pottery truly tell us about the birth of globalization? The answers lie in the silent, preserved world of the deep sea, waiting to change everything you thought you knew. What you believe was the most valuable cargo our ancestors ever risked sailing the open sea to deliver. The deep sea is history's perfect cold storage. In the crushing darkness below the sunlit zone, time itself seems to slow, light vanishes, oxygen becomes scarce, and the burrowing creatures that normally consume a shipwreck on the seafloor simply cannot survive. This creates an environment of astonishing preservation, a natural vault where wood does not rot, rope remains intact, and even the faintest residues of a ship's last meal can endure for millennia. For archaeologists, this is not merely a shipwreck, it is a sealed time capsule, a moment of ancient commerce suspended in the deep and waiting to be read. But how do we open such a capsule, resting at depths that would crush a submarine? The key was a technological leap that arrived in the late 20th century. Remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, became the eyes and hands of researchers on the surface. These sophisticated robots, equipped with lights, cameras, and delicate manipulator arms, could descend to places no human diver could ever reach. Coupled with advanced sonar systems that map the seafloor like an underwater satellite, these tools transformed the deep from an inaccessible frontier into a vast, explorable archaeological site. The result is a level of detail that rewrites textbooks. In shallow coastal waters, a wreck might be reduced to a scattered pile of amphorae, its wooden hull long since eaten away. But in the deep's cold, anoxic sediments, an entire vessel can settle and be gently buried, its structure and contents preserved in stunning totality. We are not just finding pottery, we are finding the ship itself, the very planks of its hull, the woven baskets that held goods, the coils of rope, the stone anchors, and the personal seals of the merchants who owned the cargo. This is a complete manifest, a frozen ledger of a single voyage. This preservation is what allows us to move from mere speculation to concrete reconstruction. When we recover a clay jar from 3,000 feet down, we are not just holding an artifact, we are holding a data point in a vast ancient spreadsheet. Organic residues inside can tell us it carried olive oil from Greece, or wine from Cyprus, or fish sauce from Spain. The style of the pottery pinpoints its origin workshop. The ship's timber can be traced to a specific forest. Each item, from a grand copper ingot to a sailor's simple wooden spoon, is a pixel in a high-definition picture. It is this complete, unlooted snapshot that forms the undeniable evidence, the foundational proof from which we can begin to reconstruct not just a ship's journey, but the breathtaking scale of the economic world it sailed within. That crusted amphora handle in the conservator's lab is not just a piece of broken pottery, it is a barcode, a shipping label from a world before paper. For ancient merchants sailing the Mediterranean, the amphora was the universal shipping container, a ceramic vessel designed for one purpose: to move liquid and dry goods safely across vast distances. And just like a modern container, its shape, its fabric, and the stamps pressed into its wet clay before firing all held specific, vital information. This is our first principle for reading the deep sea's ledger: cargo as pure economic data. Take that stamped symbol, the dolphin or the royal insignia. It could be the mark of a specific potter's workshop, guaranteeing quality. It could be the seal of a wealthy estate owner branding his product. Or, in some cases, it could even be a tax stamp, proof that duties were paid to a king or a city-state. Each stamp turns an anonymous jar into a named artifact, connecting it to a specific point on the map and a specific moment in the economic chain. But the story does not stop with the stamp. The amphora itself speaks through its form. Skilled archaeologists can often identify an amphora's origin at a glance. A long, slender amphora with a rolled rim might hail from the island of Rhodes, famous for its sweet wine. A more bulbous jar with sharp ribs could come from Knidos on the Turkish coast, also a prolific wine producer. The shape was a trademark, a visual shorthand that told a merchant on a crowded dock exactly what was inside and where it was from, without a single word being spoken. We can go even deeper into the very fabric of the clay itself. Through petrographic analysis, scientists slice a tiny sample of the pottery into a thin section and examine it under a microscope. They look for mineral fingerprints, tiny grains of sand, volcanic ash, or distinctive fossils that were present in the original clay pit. Chemical analysis can detect trace elements unique to a specific geographic region. Together, these techniques can often pinpoint not just a city, but the very quarry or hillside where the clay was dug, tracing the jar's journey from its raw material source to its final resting place on the seafloor. This is how a broken piece of pottery becomes a data point. Now multiply that single jar by hundreds. A shipwreck's cargo hold is never filled with just one thing. It is a composite load, a carefully assembled portfolio of goods. Finding Spanish olive oil amphorae stacked next to fine Italian glassware and raw copper ingots from Cyprus is not random. It tells us this ship was not on a simple point-to-point run. It was hopping between ports, dropping off and picking up, servicing a network. The mix reveals the demands of the markets it intended to visit, perhaps delivering luxury glass to an affluent port city, while taking on bulk copper for transport to a manufacturing center elsewhere. Each jar, each ingot, is a line in a sophisticated commercial plan, a plan we can now reconstruct from the silence of the deep. So when we look at an amphora, we are not looking at a mere container. We are looking at an address, a receipt, and a market forecast, all baked into clay. This single, frozen transaction is the Uluburun shipwreck, discovered by a sponge diver in the 1980s off the rugged coast of southern Turkey. The wreck lay at a depth of over 150 feet, a time capsule from the late 14th century before the Common Era. Its cargo was not a uniform load from one kingdom, but a floating museum of the ancient world. Imagine opening a merchant's ledger from the Bronze Age and finding every line item preserved in perfect detail. That is Uluburun. The primary cargo was raw material for empire building, 10 tons of copper ingots, shaped like stretched ox hides for easy transport, stacked neatly in the hull. Alongside them were 1 ton of precious tin ingots. Alone, these metals are just lumps of ore, but combined in the right ratio, they become bronze, the very lifeblood of the age for weapons, tools, and ceremonial objects. This was not just trade, this was the delivery of strategic industrial material on a colossal scale. But the ship's hold revealed a far more cosmopolitan story. Nestled amongst the metal were logs of fragrant ebony wood from tropical Africa, likely obtained through Egyptian ports. There were elephant tusks of ivory, raw glass ingots in vibrant cobalt blue, and Canaanite jewelry of gold and precious stones. There were storage jars from Cyprus, finely painted pottery from the Mycenaean Greek world, and even a single, startling piece of amber from the distant Baltic forests, over 2,000 miles away. This was not a simple cargo ship running between two friendly ports. This was a tramping vessel, a bulk carrier on a circuitous, long-haul route. Its captain was a logistical maestro, sailing from port to port, trading ingots for luxury goods, picking up consignments, and dropping off specialized items. One stop might have been in Cyprus to load copper, the next on the Levantine coast to trade some of that copper for Canaanite glass and jewelry, then perhaps a call at a Mycenaean harbor to pick up fine ceramics before heading towards the Aegean. What does this composite manifest tell us? It screams of deep economic interdependence. The Mycenaean palaces needed Cypriot copper to maintain their warrior elites. The Egyptian court desired Levantine glass and African ebony for its splendor. A Canaanite merchant sought Baltic amber, a rare and magical substance that had traveled across the European continent to reach the sea. The Uluburan was the physical link in this chain, a single vessel whose voyage connected at least 10 distinct cultures into one sprawling economic network. This wreck proves that the Bronze Age Mediterranean was not a map of isolated, self-sufficient kingdoms staring suspiciously at each other across the water. It was an integrated operating system. Kingdoms might have fought, but they also traded, and their economies were fundamentally wired together through these complex, risk-filled maritime supply chains. The ship's sinking was a commercial catastrophe, a loss of immense wealth, but for us it is an unparalleled snapshot, a single page from a globalized economy that thrived over 3,000 years before we ever coined the term. The physical engine of this entire system was the ship itself. Think of a Roman merchant vessel, a corbiter, with its high, rounded hull like a floating barrel, built for one purpose, to carry immense bulk cargoes of grain or wine. Now contrast that with a sleek, low Phoenician galley powered by banks of oars, designed for speed and flexibility in carrying high-value goods like dyes and metals. These were not just different styles, they were different economic tools, and their design was the single greatest limiting factor on how much, how far, and how safely ancient trade could flow. To understand the scale of their supply chains, we must first understand the ships that powered them. The earliest deep-sea traders, like the crew of the Uluburun, sailed in vessels built with a technique known as shell-first construction. Planks were sewn together with strong cords of plant fiber or leather, creating a flexible hull that could ride the waves. But this method had limits. It restricted the overall size and strength of the ship. The revolutionary leap came with the mortise and tenon joint. Imagine a wooden puzzle on a monumental scale. Shipbuilders would cut a rectangular slot, a mortise, into the edge of a plank. They would then fashion a projecting tongue, a tenon, on the next plank to fit perfectly into that slot. These joints were locked in place with wooden pegs, creating a hull that was essentially a single, interlocked wooden shell. This was the aerospace engineering of the ancient world. It allowed for longer, wider, and far more robust vessels. A ship's skeleton was no longer just its ribs. The entire skin became a load-bearing structure. This technological breakthrough directly enabled the explosion in cargo capacity we see in the archaeological record. By carefully measuring a wreck's preserved hull, archaeologists can calculate its original tonnage, the dead weight it could safely carry. The numbers are staggering. A large Roman merchant ship from the imperial era could carry over 400 tons of grain in its hold. To put that in perspective, that single shipment was enough bread to feed the population of a sizable town for an entire month. Each amphora it carried held around 25 liters. A ship laden with wine could transport thousands of these jars, a floating warehouse delivering the taste of one province to the tables of another. But for all their ingenuity, these ships operated under severe constraints. Most lacked the deep, stabilizing keels of later sailing ships. Their square sails were effective for running before the wind, but they struggled to sail close to it. This meant they were largely confined to coastal hopping, sailing from headland to headland, rarely losing sight of land. The open sea was a terrifying and dangerous expanse. Furthermore, ancient maritime commerce was strictly seasonal. From roughly October through April, the Mediterranean was considered closed for business. Winter storms made voyages suicidal, so all the grain for Rome, all the olive oil for the legions, all the luxury silks and spices had to be moved in a frantic 6-month window of fair weather. The rhythm of the entire ancient economy, from farmer to emperor, was set by this sailing calendar. The ship, therefore, was more than just a vehicle. It was the bottleneck and the catalyst. Its size dictated the volume of trade. Its design dictated the routes. Its seasonal limits dictated the pace. Every amphora recovered from the deep is a testament not just to a merchant's plan, but to a shipwright's skill, a captain's courage, and the relentless physical realities of the sea. The supply chain was only as strong as the wooden hull that carried it. The sheer volume of material moved by these ships begins to make sense when we look not at one dot on the map, but at thousands of them. Each known shipwreck is a data point, and when we plot them all, a stunning pattern emerges. The Mediterranean seafloor is not randomly scattered with wrecks. They cluster along invisible highways, lighting up the most traveled corridors of the ancient world like a constellation chart of commerce. These clusters reveal the logic of the sea, the paths where profit and peril converged. The geography was both a roadmap and a trap. Sailors sought the shortest, most predictable routes between major ports, which meant navigating narrow straits and rounding formidable capes. These places, where wind and current funneled every passing ship into a treacherous gauntlet, became the choke points of ancient trade. The Strait of Messina, with its swirling currents between Italy and Sicily, is one such place. The waters off the Greek island of Antikythera, guarding the passage between Crete and the Peloponnese, are another. And perhaps most famous is the Skerki Bank, a shallow, reef-strewn shelf off the western tip of Sicily that lies directly on the sailing line between Rome and its vital North African grain provinces. For a captain laden with cargo, these were moments of supreme concentration. A sudden storm, a navigational error of just a few degrees, or a simple equipment failure in these pinched corridors could mean disaster. What was a nightmare for an ancient merchant, however, is an archaeological gift for us. These nautical graveyards, where dozens of ships from different centuries came to rest, provide a stratified record of maritime traffic. We can literally see history pile up on the seafloor. By carefully dating the amphorae and other artifacts from wrecks in a single cluster, researchers can watch trade routes evolve in real time. A layer of wrecks containing distinctive Greek jars might be followed by a layer with early Roman types, and then later by wrecks carrying the streamlined amphorae of the imperial Roman mass market. This is not just a change in pottery style. It is a visible heartbeat of economic and political change, a seismic shift in dominance captured in broken clay. A cluster off the coast of southern France, for instance, might be dominated by Italian wine amphorae during the height of the Roman Republic, showing the export of culture in a bottle. Centuries later, that same cluster might show wrecks laden with North African olive oil amphorae, reflecting how the empire's breadbasket and its shipping patterns had shifted. These clusters allow us to finally draw the lines. We can connect the dot of a pottery workshop in southern Spain to a cluster of wrecks off the coast of Italy, and from there trace the inland distribution of that Spanish oil to military forts along the German frontier. Each cluster is a switchboard, a junction where routes intersected. By analyzing them, we move from the story of a single sunken ship to the story of the system itself. We can map the flow of goods from producer to consumer with a new, startling precision. The silent wrecks are not just tragic in points, they are the signposts that allow us to reconstruct the entire bustling network of ancient globalization, the invisible highways upon which empires were built and sustained. To reconstruct this vast network, we must follow a single thread from its source. Let us trace the journey of a copper ingot from the dark heart of a mountain to the hands of a royal smith. Our journey begins not on the open sea, but deep within the island of Cyprus, a land whose very name became synonymous with this metal. Here, in tunnels lit by flickering oil lamps, miners would extract the green-tinged ore. It was then smelted in roaring furnaces, the raw copper collected and poured into molds that produced its iconic trade form, the oxide ingot. These were not random lumps. Their distinctive shape, with 4 protruding corners resembling the stretched hide of an ox, was a brilliant design. The corners allowed ropes to be threaded through for easy lifting and stacking in a ship's hold, and the flat, broad surface made them stable cargo. One such ingot, stamped perhaps with a mark of quality or ownership, is then loaded aboard a vessel like the Uluburun, nestled among 100 identical brothers, 10 tons of potential waiting to be unleashed. But how can we be sure this ingot came from Cyprus and not from another source? This is where modern science enters the ancient mine. Researchers use a technique called lead-isotope analysis. You see, copper ore is never pure. It contains tiny, trace amounts of lead, and the isotopic signature of that lead, the unique fingerprint of its atomic structure, varies from one geological region to another. It is like the mineral's DNA. By vaporizing a microscopic sample of an ingot from a shipwreck and analyzing it with a mass spectrometer, scientists can match that fingerprint to the known signatures of ancient mining districts. The results are astonishingly precise. An ingot from the Uluburun can be definitively traced to the Troodos mountain range in Cyprus. Another, found in a wreck off the coast of Turkey, might be matched to mines in Sardinia. A third, discovered far inland in a European hoard, could be traced all the way to the Alps. This science transforms anonymous metal into a mapped journey. Now we can follow that Cypriot ingot's entire logistical chain, a process that reveals the sophistication of Bronze Age industry. First, the raw ore was mined and underwent primary smelting near the source to reduce its bulk, creating the portable oxide form. These ingots were then transported, likely by donkey or cart, down to a coastal harbor like in Komi or Hala Sultan Tek. There, they were traded to merchants and loaded onto ships. The maritime leg was the most dangerous and valuable part of the journey. A ship like the Uluburun would carry its metallic cargo across the open sea to a major distribution hub, perhaps on the coast of Anatolia or the Levant. Upon arrival, the ingots entered a secondary market. They might be sold to local smiths or transported further inland to palace workshops. There, the ingot would be remelted, alloyed with tin to create bronze, and finally crafted into a sword, a ceremonial cauldron, or a piece of intricate jewelry. The evidence for this dedicated supply chain is etched across the seabed. Cypriot copper oxide ingots have been found in shipwrecks from the southern coast of Turkey to the shores of mainland Greece. They appear in the cargo of vessels large and small, spanning centuries. This is not sporadic trade. This is a consistent, high-volume pipeline. It tells us that entire kingdoms structured their economies around the reliable import of this critical raw material. The palaces of the Mycenaean Greeks, with their need for bronze weaponry to equip their warriors, were utterly dependent on ships making that dangerous crossing from Cyprus. The disruption of this maritime route would have caused not just a shortage of tools, but a potential military and political crisis. This copper trail is the clearest proof we have of an ancient world already thinking in industrial terms. It was a world where miners, port officials, merchants, ship captains, and artisans were all linked in a single, interdependent system. The ingot that began in a smoky Cypriot furnace ended its life not as a commodity, but as the cutting edge of an era, the very substance of power and progress. By following its path, we see the supply chain not as an abstract concept, but as a tangible river of metal flowing across the sea to fuel the fires of civilization. That river of copper flowed to feed the forges of power, but another liquid fueled the everyday life of the ancient world, from the emperor's banquet to the legionary's canteen. Wine, more than any other commodity, wine leaves a perfect archaeological trail, sealed inside its ceramic shipping container, the amphora. In a bustling Roman port, the scene would have been a symphony of organized chaos. Dockworkers, moving with practiced efficiency, unloaded thousands of these pointed jars from a freshly arrived freighter. To the untrained eye, they might look similar, but to a merchant or a port official, each amphora shouted its origin. Its shape was its brand, a visual barcode etched in clay long before the invention of the scanner. Take the Dressel one. This is a classic Italian wine amphora from the late Roman Republic era. It is sturdy with a thick rim, a cylindrical body, and a long, spike-like tip designed to be driven into the soft earth of a cellar floor for stable storage. Finding a shipwreck full of Dressel one amphorae tells an archaeologist one thing immediately. This cargo came from the vineyards of central Italy, likely bound for the thirsty new provinces of Gaul. Now contrast that with the elegant Rhodian amphora. It is slender, almost graceful, with a distinctive rolled rim and a long, tapering body. Its shape whispers of the sun-drenched Greek islands, famous for their sweet, prized vintages. And then there is the later Africana type, a more bulbous jar with ribbed sides that came to dominate the market from North African producers. Each form was a trademark, a guarantee of content and quality that a literate merchant and an illiterate dockworker could both understand at a glance. The scale of this trade becomes breathtakingly clear when we examine a specific wreck, the Madrague de Giens, discovered off the southern coast of France. This was not a small coastal trader. It was a true maritime giant, a Roman freighter from the 1st century before the Common Era, with a cargo capacity estimated at over 400 tons. Its primary cargo was wine, specifically between 6,000 and 7,000 Dressel 1B amphorae, all from Italy. Think about that number for a moment. Each amphora held about 25 liters. This single vessel was carrying the equivalent of 175,000 bottles of wine on one voyage. This was not a shipment for a few elite patrons. This was bulk transport for a mass market, a floating supermarket aisle destined for the burgeoning colonies and military outposts of the Western Mediterranean. The ship itself was a marvel of logistics, its hull a carefully engineered honeycomb of compartments designed to stabilize this immense, fragile load. But the story of ancient wine is not confined to the seafloor. These ceramic barcodes traveled inland, far from their points of origin. Archaeologists find fragments of Italian Dressel, one amphorae in remote Celtic settlements in Britain, and shards of Spanish oil and wine jars in the frontier forts along the Rhine River in Germany. This distribution is a map of taste and necessity. It shows a highly commercialized industry that understood its markets. Fine Rhodian wine might be destined for the tables of wealthy senators in Rome, while the robust Italian vintage from the Madrague de Giens was likely destined for the mess halls of Roman soldiers and the taverns of new colonial towns. The amphora was more than a container, it was the key component in a sophisticated economic machine. From the vineyard to the ship, from the port to the warehouse, and finally to the consumer's home, its consistent, recognizable form allowed for standardized handling, stacking, and accounting. It created a common language of commerce across the entire Mediterranean world. When we piece together these scattered ceramic clues, from a deep-sea wreck to a rubbish pit in a distant province, we are not just tracing the trade in wine. We are reconstructing the very arteries of daily life, the tangible links that connected the taste of home for a soldier on a cold frontier to the vast, sun-baked vineyards of a world he helped build. The price of bread could topple an emperor. In the sprawling, million-strong city of Rome, the grain supply was not merely a market, it was the single most critical pillar of political power. A shortage meant hunger, hunger led to riots, and riots could end a reign. This simple, terrifying equation forced the Roman state to become what no one had been before, a logistical superpower. The system it built, known as the Annona, was the ancient world's most ambitious and systematic supply chain, a state-sponsored lifeline that ran on a relentless shuttle of ships. While the wine trade served culture and commerce, the grain trade was about raw survival and control. To feed its urban populace, Rome did not simply buy grain on the open market. It organized, commanded, and guaranteed its delivery through a vast, taxpayer-funded apparatus. The primary sources of this golden river were the fertile fields of Egypt and North Africa, provinces that became the empire's breadbasket. Each year, a fleet of specially built merchant vessels, some capable of carrying over 1,000 tons of cargo, would make the dangerous journey across the Mediterranean to the port of Ostia at the mouth of the Tiber River. Their holds were packed not with a mix of goods but with a single, homogeneous mountain of grain. This uniformity is a key clue for archaeologists. In the deep sea, grain itself vanishes, consumed by microorganisms millennia ago. But the ships that carried it leave behind a distinct signature. A wreck suspected of being a state-sponsored grain carrier is often colossal, its hull dimensions speaking to a staggering cargo capacity. Surrounding it on the seafloor, researchers might find a scatter of artifacts that act like a return address, ceramic oil lamps manufactured in Alexandria, or fragments of coarse pottery from a North African farmstead, the personal effects of the crew that point unmistakably to the voyage origin. This was not a tramping merchant on a flexible route. This was a dedicated, point-to-point bulk hauler on a mission from the state. The entire operation, from the harvesting and taxation of the grain in the provinces to its storage in massive warehouses in Ostia, and its final distribution as the daily bread dole in Rome, was a marvel of bureaucratic and engineering precision. It required a deep water harbor engineered with concrete, a fleet maintained at public expense, and a class of shipowners and merchants who worked under imperial contract. The scale was almost unimaginable. Historians estimate that by the 1st century of the Common Era, Rome needed to import between 150,000 and 300,000 tons of grain annually just to keep the city fed. That translates to hundreds of successful, massive ship voyages every single sailing season. A single storm that caught a convoy could threaten the stability of the capital. Centuries earlier, another great democracy faced the same existential dilemma. Classical Athens, with its rocky soil, could not grow enough grain to feed its citizens. Its solution also lay across the water, but in a different direction, the fertile plains surrounding the Black Sea, modern-day Ukraine. Securing this lifeline became the core strategic purpose of the Athenian navy. Their powerful fleet patrolled the Hellespont, the narrow strait that is today the Dardanelles, to ensure the grain convoys from the Black Sea could pass safely into the Aegean and reach the port of Piraeus. This was food security enforced by triremes. The need created history's first documented state-sponsored maritime insurance policy, a law that made it a capital offense for any Athenian to impede the transport of grain. The physical evidence of this scale is etched not just in shipwrecks but in port infrastructure. The enormous moles and warehouses built at Ostia, Piraeus, and other major hubs were investments on a national level, concrete proof of a commitment to moving food on an industrial scale. When we find the rare wreck of a probable grain carrier, Its immense size alone whispers of the silent, thousand-strong fleet that once moved behind it, a fleet upon which the fate of civilizations literally sailed. These were not commercial ventures, they were acts of political will, turning the unpredictable sea into a regulated highway for survival. But for every 1,000 tons of grain, there was a single, priceless ounce of pepper. The ancient economy had two distinct, interwoven layers. One was the massive, thrumming engine of bulk necessities, the grain and oil and wine that sustained populations. The other was a far more delicate, yet equally vital, circuit of luxury. These were goods not measured by the ton but by the dram. A merchant in Alexandria might oversee the loading of a grain freighter, its hold a cavern of golden wheat. Yet in a small, locked chest secured near the captain's quarters, he would place a shipment so valuable its worth could equal a fraction of the entire bulk cargo, perhaps a pouch of black peppercorns from the Malabar coast of India, or a sealed vial of Tyrian purple dye, a color so rare it was worth its weight in silver. This was the high-stakes world of ancient luxury trade, where desire for the exotic and the exquisite drove connections across staggering distances. Deep-sea wrecks give us our clearest window into this rarefied traffic. The most famous example is the Antikythera shipwreck, discovered over a century ago off that treacherous Greek island. Dating to the 1st century before the Common Era, its cargo was a breathtaking collection of wealth and artistry. It carried not amphorae of wine, but life-sized bronze statues of philosophers and athletes, their forms frozen in time. It held delicate glassware from the workshops of Syria and Egypt, and piles of silver coins. Most mysteriously, it carried the corroded remains of the Antikythera mechanism, an intricate bronze gear device so advanced it is often called the world's first analog computer, used to predict astronomical events. This was not a shipment of commodities. This was a delivery of intellectual and artistic capital, a floating gallery, and a scientific workshop bound for the elite of the Roman world. The presence of such a collection tells us that the same ships moving bulk goods also served as secure couriers for the ultra-rich. A merchant with contacts and capital could book space on a reliable grain freighter heading from the east to Rome, using the ship's established route and state-protected status as a safe passage for his invaluable, non-bulk consignment. The luxury circuit piggybacked on the infrastructure built by necessity. This layering is key to understanding the system's sophistication. A single vessel could be a microcosm of the entire ancient economy, its hold stratified by value and purpose. The heavy, cheap goods like millstones or building marble went deep in the bilge for ballast. Above them were stacked the amphorae of wine and oil, the profitable bulk of the voyage. And in the most secure, accessible location, often near the living quarters, were the locked boxes holding spices, silk, precious metals, or carved ivory. The profit margins on these small items could fund the entire journey, making the transport of bulky, lower-profit goods economically viable. This system connected worlds far beyond the Mediterranean. The discovery of Baltic amber beads in a Bronze Age wreck like the Uluburun shows that northern European forest products were already entering southern luxury networks over 3,000 years ago. In Roman times, pearls from the Indian Ocean and silk from China have been found in archaeological sites across the empire. These items did not arrive on dedicated ships from the east. They traveled in stages passed along a relay of merchants and middlemen, eventually reaching the Mediterranean shore where they were transferred onto Roman vessels. A single Indian pearl in a Roman lady's necklace represents the final link in a chain that stretched across deserts, mountains, and seas, connecting the forums of Rome to the bazaars of India and the caravan routes of Central Asia. This luxury circuit was the nervous system of the ancient global economy. It carried not just objects but ideas, styles, and technologies. The glass-making techniques found in Syria might influence artisans in Italy. The astronomical knowledge embedded in the Antikythera mechanism likely drew from Babylonian and Greek scholarship that had circulated along these same trade paths. While the grain ships fed the body of the empire, these delicate, high-value shipments fed its imagination, its identity, and its relentless desire for the wonders of a world that was, even then, intimately and astonishingly connected. The silent cargo on the seafloor holds more than goods. It holds a moment of sheer human choice. When a storm's winds scream through the rigging and waves threaten to swallow the deck, a captain faces an impossible calculation. What do you throw overboard to save the ship, and what must you protect at all costs? That desperate act of jettisoning cargo, captured forever when the ship is lost, becomes our fourth principle, the wrecking event as a market snapshot. It freezes not just a voyage, but a crisis-driven commercial decision, revealing the hidden pressures of the ancient marketplace. The composition of a wreck is never random. It is a ledger sorted by urgency. Heavy, low-value ballast stones might be the first to go, but what comes next? The choice tells a story of value, risk, and market intent. Consider a ship whose hold is filled with nothing but one specific type of amphora, all stamped with the same mark, all from the same region. This uniformity is a powerful clue. It strongly suggests a dedicated contract shipment. Perhaps a wealthy Roman villa owner on the coast of Gaul had commissioned an entire shipload of his favorite Italian wine vintage. Or more likely, this was a state-sponsored Annona grain shipment, where the cargo's homogeneity reflects a bureaucratic order, not a merchant's assortment. The entire economic purpose of that voyage was singular and direct. Now, contrast that with a wreck like the Uluburun. Its spectacularly mixed cargo of metals, ivory, glass, and pottery from a dozen cultures speaks to a different economic model entirely. This was speculative trade, or what merchants called tramping. The captain was not working a single contract. He was a floating entrepreneur moving from port to port, buying goods he believed would sell at the next stop, assembling a diverse portfolio to spread risk. The presence of highly personal items, like a merchant's seal or a collection of ornate weights for measuring precious metals, might indicate the trader was traveling with his goods, personally overseeing his investments. This mix transforms the wreck from a simple cargo list into a biography of a business strategy. Even the location of items within the wreck matters. Archaeologists meticulously map where each artifact lies. Were the copper ingots stacked neatly amidships for stability, indicating careful loading? Or were they found scattered near the stern, suggesting a last-ditch effort to shift weight as the ship foundered? Were the small, valuable luxury items like jewelry or coins clustered in a chest near where the captain's quarters would have been, showing they were under direct guard? This spatial data lets us reconstruct the hierarchy of value in real time. The dangers that created these snapshots were constant and shaped the entire economy. Piracy was a perennial threat, turning certain sea lanes into gauntlets. A wreck showing signs of fire or violent damage, with weapons scattered among the cargo, might tell a tale of interception rather than storm. The very design of trade was a response to this risk. Merchants would often split a valuable consignment across multiple ships, a primitive form of insurance. Losing one vessel was a setback. Losing all your eggs in one basket was ruin. This practice is almost invisible in the historical record, except when we find two sister wrecks from the same era nearby, carrying similar mixes of exotic goods, hinting at a coordinated strategy that tragically failed. So when we sift through the artifacts, we are doing more than cataloging antiques. We are reverse engineering a moment of peril. We are asking what that captain valued most in his final minutes. Was it the heavy, profitable copper or the lighter, irreplaceable personal treasures? The answer, written in the distribution of debris, tells us what the market demanded, what an individual cherished, and how thin the line was between fortune and catastrophe on the ancient sea. Each wreck is a stopped clock, its hands forever pointing to the instant when commerce met the ocean's raw power, gifting us a perfect, poignant picture of ancient risk and resilience. That desperate calculation on a storm-tossed deck reveals the human drama of trade. But who were the architects of this vast system? Look beyond the ship to the shore, where a different kind of specialist operated. In a bustling Phoenician trading post on the coast of Spain, a merchant unrolls a bolt of fine purple-dyed cloth from his homeland. He is not selling it for coin, but offering it to a local chieftain in exchange for raw silver from the nearby mountains. His ship, anchored in the bay, is filled with similar treasures: glass from Egypt, carved ivories from Syria, and olive oil from Greece. He is a middleman, a node in a network, and his base of operations is not a homeland city, but a colonial emporium, a purpose-built hub for exchange. This is the human infrastructure of the ancient supply chain, the merchant networks and colonies that made long-distance trade not just possible, but profitable. The Phoenicians, hailing from the coastal cities of modern-day Lebanon, were the undisputed masters of this system. They were not empire builders in the traditional sense, seeking to conquer vast territories. They were connectors. Their genius lay in establishing a string of small, strategically placed trading colonies all around the Mediterranean and beyond, from Carthage in North Africa to Gadir, modern-day Cadiz in southern Spain, and even as far as Lixus on the Atlantic coast of Morocco. These were not random settlements. Each was carefully chosen for its access to a coveted local resource: Spanish silver, North African grain, Sardinian metals, or British tin. An emporium was a neutral ground, a marketplace where different cultures could meet and barter under a framework established by the Phoenician hosts. They created the rules, provided the security, and facilitated the trust necessary for high-stakes exchange between people who spoke different languages and worshipped different gods. The physical proof of this intermediary role is scattered on the seafloor near these very colonies. Shipwrecks discovered off the coast of Sicily or southern France, dating to the era of Phoenician expansion, often carry a specific signature, a mixed cargo of cultural artifacts. In a single hold, archaeologists might find Egyptian scarabs alongside Greek drinking cups and distinctive Phoenician storage jars. This is not the cargo of a ship sailing from, say, Egypt directly to Greece. This is the cargo of a Phoenician tramping vessel that has been hopping between its network of colonies, picking up goods from one region to trade for products in another. The wreck itself becomes a floating testament to their role as the essential middlemen, the traders who physically linked the economies of Egypt, Greece, Italy, and the Western Mediterranean into one interactive system. This evidence is crucial because the Phoenicians are famously elusive in the archaeological record on land. Their great coastal cities in the Levant were often built over by later civilizations. Their lightweight, perishable goods like dyed textiles and cedar wood resin rarely survive, but their ships, lost in the deep, do not lie. A Phoenician wreck found west of Sicily, laden with goods from the eastern Mediterranean, is a data point that pins their commercial reach firmly on the map. It shows they were not just coastal crawlers, but deep-sea voyagers who regularly plied the open waters between continents. They were the original globalizers, creating the first truly pan-Mediterranean commercial culture by being everywhere and connecting everyone. Their colonies were the routers in the network, and their ships were the data packets, carrying the material culture of entire civilizations from port to port, weaving a web of interdependence that would later be inherited and expanded by the Greeks and the Romans. The final moments of a captain's ledger are written in molecules. A ceramic amphora pulled from the deep may appear empty, a hollow shell of its former purpose. But inside its microscopic pores, trapped for millennia in the dark and the cold, are the ghostly signatures of what it once held. This is our fifth principle. the world of invisible cargoes, where the most compelling evidence for ancient trade is not what we can see, but what we can scientifically detect. To understand the true scale of their supply chains, we must step into a modern laboratory where the story of a voyage is read not from stamps or shapes, but from chemical whispers. Here, a researcher carefully drills a tiny sample of powder from the inner wall of a jar. This dust is then subjected to a battery of advanced techniques. Gas chromatography and mass spectrometry can separate and identify the unique molecular fingerprints of ancient organic compounds. It is a form of high-tech archaeology, listening for echoes in the silence. The results routinely transform empty jars into vivid inventories. That seemingly vacant amphora from a Roman wreck off the coast of France might reveal traces of tartaric acid, a compound specific to grapes, confirming it carried wine. Another jar found near the Straits of Gibraltar might yield biomarkers for olive oil or even the specific proteins of fermented fish sauce, a pungent Roman delicacy called garum. Pollen grains trapped in the sediment at the bottom of a container can tell us not just about the product, but about the region where it was produced, identifying the specific flora of an Italian vineyard or a North African olive grove. This science forces a profound shift in our perspective. For generations, historians had to estimate the volume of ancient trade based almost entirely on the durable containers that survived, the pottery and the metal. But we now know this is like judging the contents of a modern supermarket by counting only the glass jars and tin cans, while ignoring all the bread, fruit, meat, and cheese that came in perishable packaging. The ancient maritime economy was saturated with goods that left no direct archaeological trace. Think of the other items that would have filled a merchant ship's hold. Baskets of dates and figs from Egypt, sacks of nuts from Anatolia, blocks of beeswax and barrels of honey from Greece, bundles of woolen cloth and linen textiles from countless homesteads, even exotic spices like pepper or cinnamon that were sold in small leather pouches. All of these would have vanished completely in a shipwreck, consumed by water, bacteria, and time. Their only record is the indirect evidence, perhaps the imprint of a woven basket left in the sediment, or more likely, the chemical residue on the interior of a nearby amphora that once sat beside them. This means every shipwreck we study represents a double loss. We recover the durable skeleton of the cargo, but its perishable flesh is gone. A vessel carrying 100 amphorae of wine was almost certainly also carrying a significant volume of these invisible goods. Therefore, our current estimates of trade scale, impressive as they are almost certainly significant underestimates. The economic activity was denser, richer, and more varied than the pottery alone can ever show. When biomolecular analysis reveals that a jar from a Phoenician wreck contained a resin from the terebinth tree used to flavor and preserve wine, it does more than identify a product. It reveals a sophisticated understanding of preservation and taste, a specific culinary preference that traveled by sea. Finding evidence of dairy fats in a Mycenaean stirrup jar tells us they were trading not just oil or wine, but perhaps a prized cheese or clarified butter. These invisible cargoes complete the human picture. They show us that ancient ships were not just moving raw materials and staple liquids. They were delivering the full spectrum of life's necessities and pleasures, from the food that sustained a family to the spices that flavored a feast. The deep sea, by preserving the jars, has also inadvertently preserved the chemical ghosts of everything they sailed alongside, compelling us to multiply our vision of the ancient world's bustling, fragrant, and richly laden maritime highways. A ship's most forgotten cargo holds its deepest secrets. Beneath the stacks of amphorae and beside the heavy ingots lining the very bottom of the hull lay piles of ordinary stones. To the ancient crew, these were ballast, dead weight added or removed to keep the vessel balanced in the water, a purely practical necessity. To us, they are a stone diary, a geological passport stamped at every single port. Each rock, unremarkable to the eye, is a witness. It was picked up from a beach or a quarry at one stop, carried across the sea, and then perhaps discarded and replaced at the next port when more valuable cargo took its place. This simple act of managing stability creates an accidental but perfect record of a ship's travels. Now, archaeologists have learned to read it. Using a technique called lithic sourcing, geologists can analyze these ballast stones. They examine the rock's mineral composition, its crystal structure, and its unique geological fingerprints. A dark, porous stone full of tiny vesicles comes from a volcanic region, perhaps the islands of the Aegean. A coarse-grained, pinkish granite could only originate from a specific quarry near Aswan in Egypt. A smooth, rounded river cobble might hail from a particular stretch of the Guadalquivir in southern Spain. By cataloging the different types of stones in a wreck's ballast pile, researchers can map the ship's itinerary in reverse. Imagine a merchant vessel that sank off the coast of Italy. Its ballast pile contains three distinct rock types. First, a volcanic tuff from the island of Melos. Second, a red granite from the eastern desert of Egypt. Third, a sandstone common to the shores of Cyprus. This is not a random collection. This is a sequential log. The story writes itself. The ship likely began its voyage in the Aegean, loading ballast from the beach at Melos. It then sailed to Egypt, perhaps delivering Aegean pottery or picking up grain. In Egypt, it unloaded some of its original cargo, making the ship too light and unstable. So the crew dumped some of the Melos stones and replaced them with heavier local granite for the next leg. Then it sailed to Cyprus, where it took on a load of copper ingots. Again, adjusting for weight, they might have swapped some Egyptian granite for Cypriot sandstone. Finally, laden with a mixed cargo from all these ports, it headed for Italy, where storm or error sent it to the bottom. Its ballast pile is a layered cake of its journey, each geological layer representing a previous port call. This method revolutionizes how we see ancient trade routes. Before, a wreck found between point A and point B was often assumed to be on a direct run between those two places. But ballast analysis routinely shatters that simple model. It reveals the tramping nature of so much ancient commerce. Ships were not just shuttles, they were collectors moving in complex, looping itineraries that linked multiple nodes in the network. A vessel might start in Greece, go to Egypt, then to Lebanon, then to Cyprus, then to Rhodes, and finally towards Rome, constantly trading, constantly adjusting its ballast and its cargo manifest. This turns our map from a series of straight lines into a dense, interconnected web. The humble ballast stone, therefore, does more than provide stability for a ship. It provides stability for our theories. It offers physical, undeniable proof of multi-leg voyages that written records never mention. It shows the Mediterranean not as a chessboard with pieces moving in simple, direct paths, but as a dynamic, swirling ecosystem of goods and ships, where every port's geology could end up in the hull of a vessel from a distant shore, and where every journey was a story written in stone long before the first word was ever set down. A wooden comb lies half buried in the silt, its teeth still finely spaced after 2,000 years. Nearby, a set of carved bone gaming pieces, perhaps for a game of ludus latrunculorum, Roman soldiers and thieves, rests where they tumbled from a sailor's hand. These are not cargo, they are fragments of life, the quiet echoes of the men who powered the entire machine. The ship was more than a cargo hold, it was a floating village, a microcosm of the ancient world where a dozen languages might be spoken over a single shared meal. To understand the true scale of these supply chains, we must step aboard not as economists but as crewmates into the cramped, communal reality of a months-long voyage. The space below deck was a dark, timbered cavern dominated by the towering stacks of amphorae and ingots. Here, in whatever narrow space remained, the crew slept, ate, and passed their limited leisure time. They were a diverse group, often drawn from ports all across the network. A ship sailing from Egypt to Rome might have a Syrian helmsman familiar with Eastern stars, a Greek sailor skilled at handling the rigging, and a North African cook who knew how to make dried beans and hardtack palatable. Their personal effects, lost in the wreck and preserved in the deep, paint this portrait of a traveling community. Archaeologists find small terracotta figurines of Egyptian gods like Bes, a protector of households, alongside amulets of the Phoenician goddess Tanit, and curse tablets inscribed in Greek. This was not theological confusion, it was practical spiritual insurance. A sailor far from home would carry his personal protector, but he might also pay respects to the local deity of a stormy cape he was about to round, hedging his bets on a dangerous sea. The most direct window into their daily existence is the ship's galley, often identified by the presence of a simple clay cooking pot, a hearth box lined with sand, and the scattered remains of meals. Analysis of animal bones and fish vertebrae from wrecks tells a story of a pragmatic, preserved diet. There are bones from salted or smoked meat, likely pork or goat, brought aboard in barrels. There are countless fish bones from species like tuna or mackerel that could be caught fresh during the voyage or stored dried. The ubiquitous presence of olive pits and the carbonized remains of grains like wheat or barley speak to the staples that filled their bellies. They ate from coarse, plain pottery bowls, a stark contrast to the fine painted ware sometimes carried as cargo. This was food as fuel, designed for endurance, not enjoyment, sustaining the muscle that raised the sails and hauled the anchor. Yet within this hardship, we see the bonds of community. Those gaming pieces were for passing long, idle hours in a calm. A wooden flute or lyre fragment suggests music filled the evenings. A single, carefully mended woolen sock speaks of someone tending to their few comforts. These men were the vital, human cogs in the machinery of empire. They did not just transport goods, they lived the network. In their shared quarters, a Greek sailor might learn a Phoenician sailing chant, while a Roman deck and tasted a Syrian spice blend in the communal stew. The cultural exchange was not an abstract historical force. It happened daily in conversation and routine, long before the cargo was ever unloaded at its destination. The supply chain was not a cold, impersonal line on a map. It was a wooden world creaking and alive, powered by the hopes, prayers, and simple daily rhythms of the men who called it home, however temporarily. Their lost combs and games remind us that behind every ingot and amphora was a human hand, and a story waiting in the deep. The silent evidence we can hold is only half the story. For every amphora-laden wreck resting on the seabed, there were countless ships that sank, leaving almost nothing behind for us to find. This is our sixth principle, the absence as evidence, and it forces us to confront the ghost fleet of antiquity. Historical records speak of maritime traffic on a staggering scale. The Roman state's Annona grain fleet required hundreds of massive voyages each sailing season to keep 1 million people fed. Ancient historians like Livy document fleets of over 200 vessels being assembled for single military campaigns, ships designed to carry soldiers, horses, and the mountains of supplies needed to sustain them. Yet where are all these wrecks? The answer lies in their cargo. A ship carrying only grain, timber, or textiles is an archaeological ghost. In the deep sea, organic materials dissolve. Wooden hulls, unless buried quickly in protective sediment, are consumed by organisms. A grain carrier that foundered would leave behind a scatter of ballast stones, perhaps a few broken pottery items from the crew's quarters, and little else. Over centuries, even this faint signature can be erased by currents and marine life. This creates a profound gap in our map. The shipwrecks we discover today are overwhelmingly those that carried durable goods, primarily pottery, amphorae, and metal ingots. These wrecks are our invaluable guides, but they may represent a specialized segment of maritime traffic, the ships moving high-value or packaged goods. They are the tip of a colossal iceberg, the submerged base of that iceberg, the true bulk of ancient shipping, was likely composed of vessels dedicated to moving the essential, perishable commodities that fueled daily life and imperial ambition. Think of the endless convoys of grain ships from Egypt and North Africa, the timber rafts and cargoes of raw lumber from forests in Lebanon or Italy, the holds packed with wool, linen, or raw hides. These shipments were the economic lifeblood, but they are nearly invisible to underwater archaeology. Their near-total absence from the physical record is, paradoxically, some of the strongest evidence for their overwhelming scale. It means our current understanding, impressive as it is built on a durable but incomplete sample. We must use the ghost fleet to recalibrate our vision. The 10 pottery wrecks found along a coastal route might represent 100 actual voyages, with 90 of those ships carrying perishables that vanished. This principle does not diminish the ceramic evidence, it contextualizes it. It tells us that the hum of ancient maritime activity was far louder, the ports more frantic, and the sea lanes more densely packed than the shipwreck map alone can ever show. The Amphora gives us a detailed ledger entry, but the silent ghost ship reminds us that the ledger itself is missing entire chapters of essential trade, the chapters written in wheat, wood, and cloth that truly powered the ancient world. The shadow of a sail on the horizon could mean fortune or doom. For every merchant vessel laden with wealth, the open sea held a mirror image, a fast, light warship like a Liburnian, emerging from a hidden cove with a single purpose, to take what others had risked everything to move. Piracy was not a rare tragedy, it was a fundamental cost of doing business, a tax of violence levied on the ancient supply chain. This ever-present threat shaped the economics of trade at its very core, and its fingerprints are sometimes found in the silent testimony of the deep. A shipwreck discovered with its valuable cargo mysteriously absent, its personal artifacts scattered in haste, or with weapons and clear signs of conflict among the debris, tells a story not of storm but of interception. These sites are rare, for a successful pirate raid would leave little behind, but they are chilling evidence of the human risk that shadowed every voyage. The price of this danger was ultimately paid by every consumer. The cost of security, of hiring armed guards, of paying for protection, or simply the premium for assuming the risk of loss, was baked directly into the final price of goods. A jar of wine in a distant province was expensive not just because of the distance, but because its journey included a hidden insurance policy against the predators of the sea. This relentless pressure forced the development of sophisticated risk mitigation strategies. Merchants learned to sail in convoy during dangerous seasons, safety in numbers making them a harder target. States began to designate and patrol protected sea lanes, especially around vital choke points. The Athenian Navy's famous patrols of the Hellespont were less about military conquest and more about economic necessity, ensuring the grain fleets from the Black Sea reached the city's harbor unmolested. The link between commerce and security became so absolute that clearing the seas of pirates could be the defining achievement of a political career. In the 1st century before the Common Era, the Roman general Pompey was granted extraordinary powers for a single mission: to eradicate the pirate strongholds in Cilicia, on the southern coast of modern-day Turkey. These pirates had grown so bold they were raiding Italy's own coast, threatening the vital grain supply, and thus the stability of Rome itself. Pompey's campaign was a massive logistical and military operation, but its goal was fundamentally economic, to secure the circulatory system of the empire. His success was celebrated not just as a military victory, but as the restoration of safe commerce. This pattern repeats throughout history, from the Athenian triremes to the Roman fleets. Naval power did not arise solely from a desire for territorial expansion. It was often a direct response to the need to protect the flow of goods, the very lifelines that sustained urban populations and funded the state. The warship and the merchant vessel were two sides of the same coin, one creating the safe passage the other required to function. The deep-sea wrecks that show no sign of violence are perhaps the strongest proof this system sometimes worked, their intact cargo a testament to the guards, the convoys, and the patrolling fleets that, more often than not, got the precious ledger home. A pristine wreck rests on a featureless plain of dark mud over 500 meters beneath the sun. Here there is no surge of waves, no shifting sand, and no light. This is the deep water advantage, a phenomenon that transforms a tragedy into a time capsule of unparalleled clarity. To understand why these deep sites are the gold standard for economic history, we must contrast them with the fate of a ship lost in the shallows. In coastal waters, a wreck is subjected to a relentless assault. Wave action pounds it to pieces over centuries. Currents scatter its artifacts across the seabed. Fishing trawlers drag heavy nets that smash and disperse what remains. And for millennia, humans have been the most destructive force of all, diving to salvage valuable metals or pottery, often destroying the context to retrieve the treasure. The result is a chaotic scatter, a puzzle with most of its pieces missing or moved. But in the profound quiet of the deep, none of this happens. The wreck settles into the soft, anoxic sediment, a process more like a gentle burial than a violent crash. Without light or oxygen, the wood-boring organisms that devour shipwrecks in shallow water simply cannot survive. The ship's structure, from its keel to its deck planking, can remain intact for thousands of years. Most importantly, the cargo stays exactly where it was stowed. Those stacks of amphorae are found still neatly aligned in rows, just as the dockworkers placed them. The captain's personal belongings remain in his small cabin. The ballast stones are piled in the bilge, and the ship's anchor lies where it was stored for the voyage. This total preservation is what allows archaeologists to move from speculation to scientific certainty. This level of integrity enables a form of analysis that is simply impossible on a disturbed site, precise spatial reconstruction. By meticulously mapping every artifact in 3 dimensions, researchers can read the ship's final moments like a forensic report. The spatial data answers critical logistical questions. Were the heavy copper ingots placed low in the hull for stability, with lighter, fragile glassware stacked above them? This reveals the ancient understanding of weight distribution and seakeeping. Were the small, locked chests containing amber beads or silver coins found near the stern, close to the living quarters? This shows which goods were considered most valuable and required direct oversight. The order in which items are found can even hint at the sequence of loading at different ports, painting a step-by-step picture of the ship's commercial itinerary before it ever set sail. The undisturbed nature of a deep-water wreck also preserves the fragile, invisible evidence. In the oxygen-poor mud, organic materials that would vanish in hours in shallow water survive for millennia. The woven straw mats placed between amphorae to prevent chafing are still there. Fragments of rope and sailcloth lie where they fell. Even food remains, like olive pits or fish bones from the crew's last meal, can be recovered. This completeness turns the ship into a closed system, a snapshot where nothing has been added and nothing has been taken away. For reconstructing ancient supply chains, this is the difference between reading a single, intact page from a merchant's ledger and trying to reconstruct the entire book from a handful of torn, water-stained fragments found in the street. The deep sea offers the intact page. It grants us the clarity to see the ancient economy not as a theory, but as a physical, operational reality, frozen at the peak of its function. In the silent darkness, the past is not just remembered, it is perfectly preserved. A single treacherous reef captured the entire story. West of Sicily, beneath the often violent surface of the Mediterranean, lies the Skerki Bank, a shallow, reef-strewn shelf that sits directly on the most vital sea lane of the ancient world. For any ship sailing from Rome to the grain-rich provinces of North Africa, or from the wealthy east to the markets of Italy, this was an unavoidable and dreaded passage. The geography here was a funnel, forcing centuries of maritime traffic into a narrow, perilous corridor, and on the seafloor below, the price of that passage is laid out in a stunning, stratified timeline. The Skerki Bank is not just a ship graveyard. It is a unique underwater archive where the entire sweep of Mediterranean commerce is compressed into one fateful location. Deep sea surveys here have revealed not one tragedy, but a layered chronicle of empires. The oldest wrecks found in this area date to the brutal Punic Wars, the epic struggle between Rome and Carthage for control of the sea. Among the scattered amphorae, archaeologists have identified vessels of Carthaginian design, their cargo holds still containing jars from North Africa. These wrecks are silent witnesses to a time when Carthaginian merchants dominated these waters, moving goods from their fertile hinterlands across to Sicily and beyond. Their presence on the seafloor marks the beginning of this location's long, grim significance as a commercial crossroads. Centuries later, the political landscape had transformed entirely. Carthage was gone and Rome now commanded the sea. The Skerki Bank wrecks from the imperial era tell this new story. One magnificent find is a massive Roman freighter, its hull laden not with grain but with prefabricated luxury. Its primary cargo was stacks of raw marble, likely from quarries in Greece or Turkey, cut into columns, slabs, and capitals. This ship was delivering the very fabric of empire, the stone to build a temple, a forum, or a governor's palace in a rising North African city. Its sinking here, so close to its destination, captures the immense investment Rome was making in its provinces, and the sheer physical effort required to project its architectural power. As the centuries turned, the cargo changed again, reflecting another shift in the economic currents. Later Roman wrecks on the bank are filled with a different kind of ceramic, not the amphorae of the Republican era, but vast quantities of African red slipware. This was the mass-produced, fine table pottery of the later empire, its distinctive red glaze coating bowls, plates, and lamps. It was manufactured in huge workshops in North Africa and shipped north to every corner of the Mediterranean. Finding a ship laden with these goods at Skerki proves that the route remained critical, but the nature of the trade had evolved. Now, North Africa was not just sending food to Rome, it was sending consumer culture, dominating the dinner tables of the empire with its elegant, affordable ceramics. This chronological layering at a single hazard is what makes the Skerki Bank so extraordinary. It provides a physical, undeniable record of change. You can see the transition from Carthaginian to Roman control etched in broken pottery. You can witness the shift from moving raw materials like marble to shipping finished goods like mass-produced tableware. Each wreck stratum is like a page in a history book, but written in ship timbers and cargo manifests instead of ink. The bank became a trap precisely because the route never lost its importance. For over 500 years, every political and economic shift in the Mediterranean funneled more ships toward this same dangerous patch of water. So this one spot on the map offers a microcosm of everything. It shows the relentless importance of the sea lane connecting Rome to its African granary, a lifeline that persisted through wars and peace. It demonstrates how ship technologies and cargo preferences evolved over time, and most powerfully, it turns abstract historical trends into tangible, discoverable layers on the seafloor. The Skerki Bank does not just hold shipwrecks, it holds the compressed timeline of an ancient global economy. where every sunken vessel was a thread in a supply chain that, for centuries, could not afford to go anywhere else. A digital map glows, its surface a constellation of ports connected by pulsing, weighted lines. This is not a modern shipping chart, but a model of the ancient economy, built from the very shipwreck data we have been exploring. The seventh principle moves us from the tangible artifact to the abstract network, revealing the hidden architecture of the entire system through a technique called network analysis. Here, researchers translate the silent evidence of the deep into a language of nodes and edges, of hubs and pathways. Each major port, from Carthage to Alexandria to Ostia, becomes a node on this digital map. The shipwrecks themselves, with their known cargoes and origins, become the data points that define the connections between these nodes. The strength of a line, its thickness on the map, is calculated from the volume and frequency of wrecks found along that corridor. A thick, vibrant line pulsating between southern Italy and North Africa, for instance, visually confirms the overwhelming evidence for the grain trade we have already seen, giving it a measurable, graphic weight. But the power of this approach goes far beyond simply illustrating what we already suspect. Network analysis software allows historians to ask new kinds of questions, to run simulations on the ancient world. By feeding all the wreck data into these models, researchers can identify which ports functioned as critical hubs, places where an extraordinary number of connections converged. These hubs were the economic powerhouses, the switchboards of the ancient Mediterranean. The model can also predict links for which we have little physical evidence. If the data shows strong connections from port A to B and from B to C, but a weak direct link from A to C, the software might suggest that most trade between those 2 points was funneled through the intermediary hub at B. This helps explain the strategic importance of places like Delos or Rhodes, which may have grown wealthy not from their own products, but from controlling the flow of goods between larger powers. Perhaps the most compelling use of this digital tool is stress testing the ancient economy. Researchers can simulate a disruption, like the closure of a key strait due to conflict or the sudden silting of a major harbor. The model then calculates how traffic would reroute, which alternative hubs would rise in importance, and where bottlenecks and shortages might occur. This lets us move from describing a historical event to understanding its systemic economic shockwaves. We can model the impact of Pompey clearing the pirates from Cilicia and watch as the digital lines representing eastern trade routes thicken and stabilize, visualizing the restoration of confidence and capital flow. This quantitative approach transforms history from a descriptive narrative into a testable science. It allows us to move beyond the story of a single sunken ship and ask bigger questions about market integration. How interconnected were the economies of the Eastern and Western Mediterranean? Did price fluctuations in Egyptian grain immediately affect prices in Rome? The network model, built from thousands of ceramic and metal data points, provides a framework to explore these ideas, turning the whispers of the deep into a chorus of quantifiable connections. It reveals the ancient world not as a collection of isolated events, but as a complex, resilient, and astonishingly integrated web, where the sinking of one vessel was merely a fluctuation in a system that pulsed with life for centuries. The captain's plan was written in the wind. Long before he consulted a map or loaded an amphora, he consulted the sky, feeling for the seasonal breath of the Mediterranean that would either carry him home or trap him in port for months. The ancient mariner did not command the sea, he negotiated with it, and his most powerful partners were the invisible currents of air and water that dictated every logistical decision. The scale and rhythm of their entire supply chain was not just a product of human ambition, but a direct response to the planet's immutable rhythms. The most famous of these partners were the Etesian winds, known today as the Meltemi. These strong, dry northerlies blow reliably across the Aegean Sea every summer from roughly May to September, For a sailor heading from the Greek mainland south toward Egypt or east toward the Levant, these winds were a gift, a powerful engine at his back. But for the return journey, they were a formidable wall. This simple meteorological fact created the ancient world's sailing calendar. The Mediterranean was effectively closed for business from October through April. Winter storms made voyages suicidal, and the unreliable winds of spring and fall were a gamble only the desperate or the foolhardy would take. So all the grain for Rome, all the copper for Mycenae, all the silks and spices had to be moved in a frantic 6-month window of fair weather. This seasonal compression had profound economic consequences. It meant harbors were scenes of manic activity during the sailing season, with ships loading and departing in a continuous stream. It created a boom and bust cycle for dockworkers, merchants, and shipbuilders. It forced states to stockpile immense reserves of grain to survive the winter months when no ships could bring relief. The supply chain, therefore, had a heartbeat, a pulse that quickened with the summer sun and stilled with the autumn gales. Geography provided the channels for this pulse. The Mediterranean is almost perfectly designed for maritime interconnection. It is a nearly enclosed sea, its central position between 3 continents making it a natural crossroads. Its countless islands, from Cyprus to Crete to Sicily, acted as stepping stones, allowing ships to hop from one landmass to another without ever losing sight of shore for more than a few days. These islands were not just navigational aids, they were vital pit stops for fresh water, repairs, and safe anchorage during sudden storms. But this same benevolent geography could turn treacherous in an instant. Narrow straits like the Strait of Messina or the Bosporus funneled wind and current into violent torrents. Promontories like Cape Malea in southern Greece were so notoriously stormy that ancient sailors had a saying, "Round Malea and forget your home." These choke points, as we have seen, became the shipwreck clusters that light up our archaeological maps, the precise places where the natural highway became a trap. Now, modern science is allowing us to see an even larger pattern. Paleoclimatology, the study of past climates, uses evidence from ice cores, tree rings, and deep-sea sediments to reconstruct ancient weather. By analyzing these records, scientists can identify periods of generally stable, favorable climate in the Mediterranean. When researchers overlay these climatic good periods with the archaeological evidence from shipwrecks, a fascinating correlation often emerges. Periods of warmer, more predictable weather frequently coincide with spikes in shipwreck evidence from that era. This does not necessarily mean more ships were sinking. It strongly suggests that more ships were sailing. Favorable climate meant longer, safer, effective sailing seasons, perhaps allowing voyages to start earlier in spring or extend later into autumn. It meant merchants could plan with greater confidence, leading to more investment, more voyages, and a denser web of trade. Conversely, a shift toward a more volatile, stormier climatic phase might see a contraction in maritime activity, with wrecks concentrated in the ever more dangerous core sailing months. This reveals the ultimate macro force, a shift in the prevailing wind patterns, a slight cooling of sea temperatures, or an increase in storm frequency could render a once reliable route economically non-viable. A harbor that had served as a key hub for centuries might slowly silt up due to changed rainfall patterns upstream, or see its protective sandbars shift, making it too dangerous for large freighters. The rise and fall of ports and the arteries of supply that fed them were often written not in treaties but in tree rings and ice cores. The ancient mariner knew he was at the mercy of the gods of wind and wave. What he could not know was that those gods were shaping the destiny of empires, determining which cities would feast and which would starve by the simple, silent turning of the global climate. His ledger was made of clay and copper, but the true ledger of his world was written in the sky. The Amphora's journey did not end at the dock. Its voyage from a distant vineyard was only complete when its contents were poured into a jug in a Roman home, a tavern, or a legionary's mess hall. The shipwreck is the middle chapter of a much longer story, one that leads from the open sea into the deafening noise and frantic motion of a major port. To understand the true scale of the supply chain, we must follow that single jar ashore into the terrestrial machinery built to receive, process, and distribute the ocean's bounty. The most vivid window into this final stage lies not underwater but buried in volcanic ash. The port city of Pompeii, frozen in a single moment, shows us the end point of the system with astonishing clarity. Here, archaeologists have uncovered the shops and storerooms of merchants whose livelihoods depended on the ships we have been studying. In one building, known as the House of the Ship Europa, a vivid fresco even depicts the very type of merchant vessel that would have brought the owner's wealth, a direct artistic link between the seafarer and the city dweller. But for sheer scale, we must look to Rome's own port, Ostia. At its height, Ostia was a monument to logistics. Its artificially deepened harbor basins could accommodate the largest grain freighters. Its docks were lined with massive, multi-story brick buildings called horia, the ancient world's distribution centers. Walking into one of these warehouses, you would be surrounded by a forest of pillars, supporting upper floors where thousands of amphorae and sacks of grain could be stored. The ground floors often had raised floors to keep goods dry and allow air to circulate, a simple but brilliant design for preserving perishable cargo. These were not passive storage spaces, they were active, secure commercial hubs. Guard dogs were kept, and the thick doors were often secured with complex locks, a testament to the immense value of the goods inside. This is where the ship's cargo met the bureaucracy of empire. Port officials would inspect shipments, check the stamps on amphorae against manifests, and levy the customs duties that funded the state. Some of these stamps are our most personal connection to the ancient economy. While many name the producer or estate, others specifically name the negotiator, the merchant who owned the goods, or the mercator, the shipper who transported them. Imagine finding an amphora stamp in a warehouse in Ostia that reads Lucius Titusius, merchant. Now, imagine divers recovering an amphora from a wreck off the coast of France bearing that exact same stamp. In that moment, the abstract network snaps into human focus. We can trace a specific individual's commercial reach from his warehouse in Italy, across a dangerous sea lane, to his lost investment on the seabed. This links a name in a historical ledger to a tangible tragedy, giving a face and a fortune to the supply chain. From these ports, the goods flooded inland. Amphorae were transferred to river barges to travel up the Tiber to Rome, or loaded onto carts to begin the long journey overland to frontier provinces. The sheer volume of material processed through these nodes is written in the ruins themselves. At Ostia, archaeologists have found mountains of broken amphorae. A carefully managed landfill of shipping containers called a Monte Testaccio in Rome is an artificial hill made entirely of millions of discarded Spanish olive oil amphorae. This is the terrestrial echo of the shipwrecks. For every vessel that sank, 1,000 more arrived safely, and their empty containers were thrown away in such staggering numbers that they literally formed new geography. The shipwreck gives us the pristine, individual snapshot. The port and its warehouses show us the relentless industrial repetition. Together, they frame the complete economic cycle, from the loading of a single jar to the feeding of a megalopolis. The silent cargo on the seafloor was never meant to stay there. It was destined for the shouting dockworkers, the meticulous accountants, and the bustling markets of a world that moved, one carefully stamped amphora at a time, to the rhythm of the sea. The harbor at Berenice was a world away from the bustling docks of Ostia. Here, on the sun-scorched Egyptian coast of the Red Sea, the air smelled not of damp wood and Italian wine, but of exotic spices, salt, and the dry heat of the desert. A Roman merchant, his tunic dusty from the caravan journey across the eastern desert, watched as dockworkers unloaded a vessel that had just completed a voyage of unimaginable distance. Its hull was not filled with amphorae from Gaul, but with sacks of black pepper from the Malabar coast, bundles of Chinese silk transshipped through Indian ports, and rough-cut gems from Sri Lanka. This scene shatters the map. It proves the Mediterranean supply chain was not a closed system, but a single, powerful segment in a global relay that stretched from the forests of Germania to the ports of southern India. The deep sea has begun to reveal this staggering connection, not in the Mediterranean itself, but in its adjacent basins. In the Red Sea, shipwrecks from the Roman era tell a story of two-way traffic. Archaeologists have discovered sites containing Roman amphorae, glassware, and coins alongside distinctly Indian pottery, like the sturdy storage jars known as torpedo jars from the Gujarat region. These wrecks are the physical handshake between two oceanic systems. They represent ships that plied the monsoon routes across the Indian Ocean, likely manned by Indian, Arabian, and Roman sailors, meeting at neutral ports like Berenice or Myos Hormuz to exchange the treasures of East and West. The goods themselves are the ultimate proof of concept. A single peppercorn found in the soil of Pompeii, or a fragment of Chinese silk preserved in a desert tomb along the Silk Road, represents the final link in a supply chain over 8,000 miles long. These items did not magically appear. They moved in stages through a sophisticated series of handoffs. A merchant in the Indian port of Muziris would load pepper onto a ship that caught the summer monsoon winds westward. That ship would sail to Arabia or the Horn of Africa. There, the pepper might be traded for Roman gold coins or fine glass, and then loaded onto another ship heading up the Red Sea. Upon reaching an Egyptian port, the cargo was unloaded, taxed by Roman officials, and then loaded onto camels for a 10-day trek across the desert to the Nile. At the river, it was transferred to barges going north to Alexandria, where it could finally be loaded onto a Mediterranean freighter bound for Rome. This was not a simple to-be journey. It was a meticulously timed, multimodal operation that required coordination across cultures, climates, and calendars, all dependent on the predictable rhythm of the monsoon winds. The scale of this connection is confirmed by a remarkable historical document, the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, written in the 1st century of the Common Era by an anonymous Greek-Egyptian merchant. It is a practical sailor's guide to the ports and products of the Red Sea, East Africa, Arabia, and India. It reads like a commercial directory, listing what to buy and sell in each port, from Roman wine and copper to Indian spices, pearls, and silk. It even mentions a direct route from Egypt to India, a daring open ocean voyage that bypassed the coastal hops, taking advantage of the monsoon to sail straight across the Arabian Sea. This was the ancient world's equivalent of a non-stop intercontinental flight, a testament to the confidence and commercial drive of the era. The presence of these goods in Mediterranean shipwrecks, even in small quantities, is the archaeological signature of this vast network. A Roman wreck found off the coast of Sicily might yield a handful of peppercorns in a sealed vial, or a few beads of Indian carnelian mixed in with the crew's personal effects. These are not the primary cargo, but the souvenirs or personal trade goods of a well-connected merchant, tangible proof that he or his suppliers operated at the very edge of the known world. This expands our understanding of scale exponentially. The supply chain that moved grain from Egypt to Rome was just one local loop in a planetary circuit. It means a Roman citizen dining on peppered stew was participating in an economic network that directly affected producers in South India, shipbuilders in Arabia, and caravan drivers in the Egyptian desert. The deep sea evidence from the Red Sea, coupled with terrestrial finds of Roman coins in India and Indian goods in Rome, paints a picture of a proto-globalized economy. It was a world where a storm in the Indian Ocean could, through a cascade of delays and shortages, eventually influence the price of a luxury in a Pompeian market. The Mediterranean was not the center of this world. It was a powerful, voracious hub, plugged into a much older and wider web of exchange, drawing the ends of the earth into its relentless, interconnected flow of desire and demand. A silent glider moves through the eternal night, its path illuminated only by its own synthetic senses. This is the new pioneer of the deep, an autonomous underwater vehicle, or a UV, and it represents the next great leap in our quest to read the ocean's library. Freed from the tether of a surface ship, these robotic explorers can map vast swaths of abyssal plain for days on end, their high-resolution synthetic aperture sonar painting the seafloor in startling detail. They are no longer just searching for obvious mounds of amphorae. They are detecting subtle magnetic anomalies caused by buried iron fittings or the faint chemical signatures of ancient wood leaching into the sediment. Coupled with this are laser scanners that can create photorealistic three-dimensional models of a wreck site without ever touching it, and artificial intelligence algorithms trained to recognize the distinctive shapes of man-made objects amidst the natural clutter of the deep. This technological convergence promises a coming wave of discovery that will dwarf everything that has come before. The next decade will likely see the identification of hundreds, perhaps thousands, of new shipwreck sites, particularly in the deeper, more remote basins of the Mediterranean that have until now been too expensive and time-consuming to survey systematically. This is how we will finally begin to find the ghost fleet, the ships carrying perishables like grain and timber that have eluded us. A deep water plain, far from any coastal hazard, might hold the perfectly preserved, sediment-buried hulls of Roman grain freighters, their organic cargo long gone but their immense wooden skeletons intact. Each new discovery will be another data point, allowing historians to refine their network models with unprecedented precision, moving from a sample to something closer to a complete census of ancient maritime traffic. Yet this powerful new capacity brings profound questions to the surface. Many of these wrecks will lie in international waters, beyond the clear legal jurisdiction of any single nation. Who has the right to study them or to recover artifacts? The guiding principle emerging among researchers is preservation in situ, the idea that a wreck site is an irreplaceable archaeological context that should be disturbed only when absolutely necessary for science and with the utmost care. The goal is shifting from treasure retrieval to non-invasive data collection, using robots to map, photograph, and sample, while leaving the site undisturbed for future generations with even better technology. This ethical framework acknowledges that the deep sea is not just a repository of objects, but the world's greatest museum, whose exhibits are arranged by history itself. The future of deep-sea archaeology, therefore, is a balance between robotic exploration and respectful stewardship. It is about using our most advanced tools not to plunder, but to listen, to map the whispers of the past on a planetary scale. As these autonomous eyes peer into the darkness, they are not just looking for lost ships, they are preparing to illuminate the full, breathtaking scale of the ancient world's ambition, one silent, magnetic whisper at a time. The textbooks often painted a quiet picture of the ancient world, one of isolated city-states and self-sufficient farming villages, where long-distance trade was a rare luxury for kings and heroes. But the silent testimony of the deep-sea cargo tells a different story entirely, a story of relentless commercial energy. This is our eighth and perhaps most profound principle, the power of shipwrecks to force historical revisionism, to confront comfortable narratives with the undeniable weight of physical evidence. Each significant wreck is not just a discovery, it is a challenge, a data-driven argument that compels us to rewrite the chapters of our past. The traditional view of the Bronze Age Mediterranean, for instance, was one of palace-centered economies where gift exchange between elites accounted for the movement of exotic goods. Then came the Uluburun, its staggering composite cargo of 10 tons of Cypriot copper, a ton of tin, African ebony, Baltic amber, and Mycenaean pottery did not represent a royal gift. It represented a bulk commercial shipment. This single wreck proved that long-distance, high-volume trade in raw materials and luxury items was not a rare diplomatic event. It was a routine, organized, and highly profitable business venture over 3,000 years ago. The merchants and captains of that era were not peripheral figures. They were the essential circulatory system connecting empires, operating on a scale that historians simply did not appreciate until the sea gave up its proof. The revision continues with the Roman economy. For generations, scholars debated the extent of its integration, often viewing trade through the narrow lens of state-sponsored grain shipments for the urban poor. The Annona was seen as an exception, not the rule, but the shipwreck map tells a story of pervasive, bottom-up commercialization. The thousands of wrecks laden with Spanish olive oil, Italian wine, and North African pottery are not carrying state rations. They are carrying consumer goods for a vast, interconnected market. The distribution of these amphorae, from British military forts to German frontier towns, shows that a retired legionary on the Rhine could enjoy the same fish sauce and wine as a merchant in Pompeii. This was not an economy driven solely by imperial command. It was a thriving marketplace of private enterprise where supply chains responded to popular taste and demand across a continent. The shipwrecks elevate the Roman negotiator, the merchant, from a footnote to a central architect of imperial cohesion, his commercial networks binding the provinces together as firmly as any legion. Perhaps the most striking revision concerns the so-called Dark Ages, the centuries following the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. The classic narrative is one of shattered connections, of trade routes dissolving into local subsistence. But the seafloor holds clues of continuity. In the Western Mediterranean, shipwrecks from the 6th and 7th centuries have been discovered carrying cargoes of Palestinian amphorae, likely transporting wine or oil. These ships were sailing in an era of profound political fragmentation, yet the commercial links, particularly in the Eastern Basin, persisted. They may have been thinner, the networks more regional, but they never fully broke. This evidence forces a crucial nuance. The end of the Roman state did not mean the immediate end of all Mediterranean commerce. New powers, like the Byzantine Empire and later Islamic caliphates, maintained and adapted these maritime highways, proving that the economic habits and connections forged over a millennium were more resilient than any single political structure. Each of these deep-sea corrections replaces scholarly speculation with hard material fact. They shift the historical spotlight away from solely kings and conquests, and onto the merchant calculating his profit, the captain reading the wind, and the sailor mending a net. These individuals, once nearly invisible in the grand narrative, are now seen for what they were, the central actors in a story not of isolated civilizations, but of a persistently, astonishingly connected world. Their lost voyages, preserved in the deep, are the final and most persuasive editors of our history books. That golden cup resting in the silt is a question made solid. As our robotic explorers reveal more of these sunken treasures, a profound and difficult debate surfaces alongside them. Who truly owns the past when it lies at the bottom of the sea? The answer is not found in a single law, but in a tangle of history, identity, and modern values. Legally, the waters a wreck lies within often dictate the first claim. A ship found within 12 nautical miles of a coast falls under that nation's territorial sovereignty. But what about a vessel carrying artifacts from 5 different ancient cultures, each with modern descendants who feel a deep cultural connection to those objects? The nation controlling the water may have legal custody, but does it have the sole moral right? This becomes even more complex in international waters, the vast expanse beyond any national jurisdiction, where the principle of finders-keepers has historically ruled. For decades, this gray zone was a playground for commercial treasure hunters who could legally salvage wrecks, sell the artifacts, and disperse a unique historical collection forever. The drive was not for knowledge but for the market value of gold coins and intact amphorae. This practice, while lucrative, often destroyed the very context that makes a shipwreck historically priceless. Recovering pretty objects while discarding ballast stones, hull fragments, or organic remains is like tearing the most valuable pages from a book and burning the rest. The story is lost even if a few beautiful illustrations are saved. In response to this, a global framework emerged, the UNESCO Convention on the Protection of the Underwater Cultural Heritage. This international agreement, adopted in 2001, establishes a crucial ethical standard. Its core principle is preservation in situ, meaning that a wreck site should be left undisturbed on the seafloor as a first option. If excavation must occur, it should be for the purpose of scientific study and public benefit, not commercial gain. The Convention urges nations to cooperate, to share knowledge and technology, and to treat these sites not as salvageable resources, but as irreplaceable chapters of human history that belong to all of us. This shifts the focus from ownership to stewardship, yet the tension remains palpable. For nations with limited resources, partnering with a commercial salvager who promises a share of profits can be tempting, a way to fund museums or research. And the allure of treasure is a powerful narrative, one that can sometimes overshadow the quieter, more profound story of cultural connection and historical insight. The future of deep-sea archaeology hinges on navigating this ethical landscape with the same skill an ancient captain needed for a reef-strewn coast. It requires recognizing that a Phoenician shipwreck off the coast of Sicily is not just Italian patrimony or Lebanese heritage, but a shared node in the story of human interconnection. The goal is moving from a model of extraction to one of interpretation, ensuring that the silent libraries of the deep are read carefully, completely, and for the benefit of every generation to come. Your own screen could be the next frontier of discovery. Across the globe, archaeologists are turning to a powerful new partner in their quest to map the deep, the public. This is the world of citizen science, where anyone with an internet connection can help uncover the lost highways of the ancient world from their living room. Projects now exist that allow you to sift through high-resolution sonar scans of the seafloor, looking for the telltale rectangular shapes of man-made objects or the subtle mounds that might hide a buried hull. You are not just watching history, you are actively participating in its recovery, flagging potential sites for professional teams to investigate further. This collaborative model democratizes discovery, transforming passive viewers into active explorers in a grand, collective effort to read the ocean's forgotten ledger. Beyond raw data, you can now step onto a virtual seafloor. Museums and research institutions are creating incredibly detailed three-dimensional models of entire wreck sites, using photogrammetry data collected by underwater robots. With a few clicks, you can navigate around the stacked amphorae of a Roman merchantman, zoom in on the intricate carving of a stone anchor, or examine the tool marks on a copper ingot, all without getting wet. These digital twins are more than just impressive visuals. They are permanent, accessible records of sites that are fragile and often under threat. They allow students in classrooms, historians on other continents, and curious minds everywhere to study, measure, and wonder over these time capsules as if they were there. This direct engagement does something profound. It closes the distance between us and the past. The story of these ancient supply chains ceases to be a dry academic topic about economies and empires. It becomes the tangible story of human connection, of the merchant packing a lunch for a months-long voyage, the potter stamping his name with pride, the farmer hoping his olive oil will grace a distant table. It is a narrative of innovation, risk, and the relentless drive to reach beyond the horizon. By engaging with these digital wrecks or scanning sonar maps, we are not just finding lost ships. We are reclaiming a chapter of our shared human legacy, one that demonstrates our ancestors were not so different from us. They too lived in an interconnected world, faced logistical challenges, and dreamed of opportunity across the water. The echoes of their globalized system are the foundations of our own. Every anomaly you spot on a map, every virtual amphora you examine, is a thread pulled from the deep, slowly weaving a more complete and awe-inspiring tapestry of who we are and how we got here. We are left with a map not of kingdoms but of currents, a map where the most important lines are not borders drawn on land, but the invisible shipping lanes etched by wind, profit, and courage on the open sea. The libraries of the deep have given us their final, most profound lesson. The ancient Mediterranean was not a collection of isolated cultures staring suspiciously across the water. It was a single, pulsating network of economic energy, its heartbeat measured not in the decrees of kings, but in the relentless rhythm of merchant voyages departing with the spring and returning with the autumn. The silent witnesses on the seafloor have spoken, and what they reveal is a world of astonishing scale and sophistication. We see supply chains that stretched from the forests of the Baltic to the deserts of Egypt, moving 10-ton shipments of raw copper, fleets of ships carrying enough grain to feed a metropolis for a year, and delicate relays of luxury that connected Roman dining rooms to the pepper vines of India. This was an ancient world already deeply fluent in the complex languages of globalization, logistics, and risk management. They built standardized containers, managed just-in-time delivery constrained by seasonal winds, insured cargoes by splitting them across vessels, and created financial instruments to fund long-distance ventures. They were us, grappling with the same fundamental challenges of connection and supply, just on a wooden-hulled, wind-powered scale. This evidence compels a quiet revolution in how we see history. Our gaze must shift from the palace and the battlefield to the warehouse and the wharf. True power in the ancient world often flowed not from the tip of a spear, but from the hold of a ship. The merchant, the shipwright, and the sailor were the unsung architects of empire, the vital connective tissue that made large-scale civilization possible. Their voyages wove a web of interdependence so strong that its strands survived the collapse of political dynasties. So let this exploration be a reminder. History is not only written in treaties and chronicles, it is written in the ballast stones from a dozen ports, in the chemical ghost of wine inside a broken jar, and in the personal seal of a trader lost with all his hopes. It is a story found in the humble cargo holds of ships that dared to bridge worlds, carrying within them the seeds of the connected planet we inhabit today. If this journey into the deep past has reshaped your view of history, consider joining our ongoing exploration. Subscribe to dive with us into more mysteries waiting to be unraveled. And we would love to hear from you in the comments below. Of all the ancient goods that traveled these vast distances, from Cypriot copper to Indian pepper, which one captures your imagination the most?